It's getting really hot out. Also, I was thinking about another video idea where we can shoot at... Who the heck is this guy?
Oh, here we go. Hey, hey, hey.
Hey man, how's it going?
Good. You guys need any help with counterinsurgency?
I mean, we were just trying to film a YouTube video.
You boys look like you could really use some help. Listen, $5 to see it, $10 to touch it, $15 to smell it.
You're still talking about counterinsurgency?
Yeah. Hey man, look, every Marine's not a rifleman, so let's just, come on.
Will this cover it?
We're good. You got 20 minutes.
All right, hop in.
All right.
20 minutes starting now.
Contact right! Kilos on station! We got military-age males in the open. Come on, let's go! Put some bombs on target! Wilson, get that machine gun up on that bridge line!
My lords and lads, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about something of great importance, at least in my mind, and it's something that I think is very relevant to the firearm zeitgeist that I found myself in here. For most of us, statistically speaking, we haven't been in many firefights, and today we're talking about the anatomy of a firefight. Now, what is a firefight? A firefight is essentially a gun battle between two factions. I mean, in theory, there could be multiple factions, a little battle royale style, but at the base level, you have two factions of humans trying to dispatch one another using small arms.
They're shooting at us! We'll shoot back!
The reason we're talking about this today is, like I said, statistically speaking, most of us have not been in a firefight to a large scale. So today I wanted to bring on a guest who has been there and done it. Mr. Zachary Bell, veteran with a sign, please get over here.
Hi.
Good to have you on the channel, sir.
Pleasure.
Now, for your background, what'd you do that I can bring you on and talk about your gunfighting experience?
I was an infantry rifleman, deployed twice to Afghanistan, March 08. I went to Garmser, and then I did the initial push into Marja in 2010.
So the man has combat experience. Today we're gonna break down what goes into the anatomy of a firefight.
Mainly guns, that's a big part of it.
Who would have thought? Bam! I just caught you on the toilet, time thefting from your boss. Maybe you're drinking your coffee, eating your beer, whatever you're doing, make sure you like and subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. It does mean a lot, and I appreciate it greatly, because while you're leaving a comment, I'm reading it while I'm on the toilet. So it's like we're connected. Now, why is this important? Well, I feel like in gun culture, there's a lot of flat range ninja-isms. And what I mean by that is typically what you see on social media in the gun space is a lot of high-speed, flat range running and gunning. And to be truthful, there's nothing really wrong with this because it shows a high proficiency with the weapon system. Now, when we actually look at combat footage of troops or soldiers, anywhere from, say, now in Ukraine, or if we go back to look at footage of the Marines in Marja, you don't see a lot of high-speed, flat-range ninja-isms. What you see are guys that are extremely tired. They're probably fatigued to some level of degree, of lack of sleep or hunger. They've been moving all day, carrying a lot of kit, and you don't see the high-speed mag reloads. You see guys dumping rounds, they're doing reloads, they're talking, they're getting cover, they're communicating, they're not standing out in the open, conducting 1R1s. Because I've never been in a big firefight, so there's a lot that would go into this in my head of how you conduct this. So Zach, having the combat experience from the Marines, is gonna break down some things for us and maybe dispel some preconceived notions.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Well, I guess I'll try.
I'm gonna try.
So Zach, you were in, what was the first deployment?
First deployment was to Garmser, Afghanistan in 2008.
It's the most dangerous place in all of Afghanistan.
What was the fighting like there?
The fighting there was actually, it was a lot of open areas kind of like this here, and we would take over like a town, like a village, and we would go in that building, knock out some holes, put some sandbags up, and we'd do patrols all day. But in Garmser, it was a lot easier than it was in Marja, because we were part of the 24th MU, so we had direct air, direct artillery, everything directly supporting us, because a MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, is a base on wheels, basically.
So how many firefights were you getting into in Garmser?
In the initial assault, about every day, and then for about 30 days after that, when you're reorganizing the battle space and stuff, it's pretty dynamic as well. But, it kind of dropped off for a little bit until they started harvesting poppy, which led to the cultivation of opium, which then led to more firefights.
Is that the CIA's pastime?
Somebody's pastime.
Very nice. Was that your first firefight?
My first firefight, I was actually with a friend of mine named Chicky Chop. We were holding, looking down towards a building with a blue door, and my squad leader said, if it cracks, it's over here, and if it whizzes, it's bad.
A hiss means it's close. A snap means... Now they're shooting at us!
And I'd never heard that before, and then I heard a crack, and I was like, whoa, that was close, and then a whiz, which is right next to my ears, and that was the first firefight I was ever in. Lasted for about an hour or so.
What are we shooting at?
I don't know!
Were you scared?
I was scared, but I mean, they're trying to kill you and you're trying to not to die.
Sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
In your first firefight versus your last firefight, what were the big takeaways you noticed?
The first firefight, you have no idea what you're doing. You're just trying to adapt to the moment and understand the adrenaline, that your kind of animal instinct kicks in, fight or flight, all that jazz.
Every single one of you is going to have to make 100 decisions that there is no right answer to. But guess what? You have to act.
You're really just trying to calm yourself down and do what you got to do. That's why you've like done drills, muscle memory, and everything kind of pops into place. It's really kind of scary. It's just like anything else.
Would you say your lizard brain takes over?
Yeah, you go pure T-Rex.
Sick.
You have real T-Rex arms. I know gun culture. So my name's Garand Thumb, and then I had T-Rex arms. Is that it?
That's pretty close.
Okay, yeah.
I think in the gun space, there's a lot of guys that, me being guilty of this too, where you have platforms, and I try and be very transparent, like, hey, I'm just a dude on the internet, I'm not a high-speed guy, and I don't have any gunfight experience. I'm very passionate about firearms and the Second Amendment, which ensures citizens having firearms to keep the checks and balances for the American people. In some ways, like with the veterans that have been there and done combat, you know, where they actually know what goes into, say, a gunfight. I think that sometimes there can be disconnects. I think sometimes there can even be hostility towards crowds where it's just you don't know what you don't know. Now, I don't think you're someone that's trying to gatekeep, but I think that you've seen things on the interwebs where you're like, that doesn't fly. That would not fly in IRL.
No, I've seen people like shoot out the windows of their cars and stuff like that, running around with like 12 mags and stuff. None of that's real. That's not going to work. And granted, what I did was mainly light infantry stuff. I mean, the combat I saw in Afghanistan is so completely different than what people saw in Iraq, for instance. You would move around terrain like this, at least a click one way out, at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, and then a click back. You have 8 to 12 guys, you're trying to maneuver across the battlefield, it's hot. My watch melted at one point. That was something that happened, yeah. Everything is just based off of being able to move quickly through open areas, because you come across a village and then farmland, village, then farmland. And then when you're in the open, that's when it's most dangerous. So you're just trying to maneuver through those spaces quickly.
Would you often have Overwatch when you're moving?
What the hell? That was your Overwatch, Einstein.
Overwatch every time. We would do team wedge, squad columns. First team would be in Overwatch, second and third team would follow behind, and then they would hold an Overwatch. First team would move forward in the open space, and then we'd do it that way.
So bounding Overwatch.
Bounding Overwatch, that's what I was looking for.
Gotcha.
You're way better at this than me.
I, for whatever reason, just retained this knowledge.
Well, somebody has to.
Someone's got to do it.
But yeah, that's the best way to clear the open space. Like what we did earlier, the Australian peelback, that's the easiest way to get out of a danger area where there's no cover, no concealment, anything. You're like on flat farmland, flat terrain like this. Suppressing fire, keeping your heads down, it's real quick movements, real quick movements. You know, a few rounds, pop, 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 moving, move, moving, move, moving, move. That's it.
It's pretty good stuff to know.
Yeah.
I feel like within the flat range space, you know, a lot of times guys, it really boils down to the conducting of drills and becoming good at shooting, and I think that is absolutely important. But when it comes to working with other guys and conducting massive maneuvers, or not even massive, but say just, you know, 5 guys, 10 guys, however big you can get with your group of buds, it becomes a little bit more tricky, the level of safety that would go into that. Say you're doing bounding Overwatch like that, because if you're telling me, hey, I gotta go to conduct a movement out in the open, I don't have anyone covering me, I'm gonna say, go pound sand. Like, ideally, that's not gonna happen, because I'm assuming that's how you die.
Yes, because they would catch you in the open. They would trail us on the roads because they know where the bombs are. They're not trying to get blown up. They would trail us on the roads and wait till we got into an open area. Like you would come out of like a canal kind of like this. These are like the Wadi canal systems, or what they would look like in Afghanistan where all the water moves through. And so some of them you could jump over like a spot like that, or where you did beautifully. But other times come across and water's up to your chest, you just can't jump that far.
Oh, it's been a beautiful day today. Gunfight, soaking wet.
Because it's, you know, like 20 feet across. And so they're just trailing you, wait to get to the open area. They wait, set up a few machine guns, and that's pretty much it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
When you see guys working on the flat range, they're conducting their drills, when you were in combat, did you ever do any like high-speed mag changes?
No.
Crazy cool reloads?
No.
Popping behind cover, shooting dynamically?
No, I mean, you would do some of those drills, but like, honestly, you have to think too about the military. You're training at scale and at mass.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what anyone's proficiency level is at any given point, or like what their experience is prior to them being trained in that moment. Like even when we run ranges, you're just trying to teach them the fundamentals of like control pair, hammer pair, control pair, hammer pair. You know, and then just teaching them to move as one, like... When we were range coaches, we would have them all in gear and it'd be, you know, like one team leader to split up amongst everyone else, and we would move them left or right down the range. Even though we had to make sure they didn't flag each other because people had to be broken of those habits.
Yeah.
You have to do that over and over and over again until they just respond. When someone says contact left, everyone moves left.
Was there anyone in your, say, squad, platoon, company that seemed like high-speed cool guys conducting flat-range ninja-isms?
So at that time in the Marine Corps, we were just worried about like learning how to maneuver the battle space the most, but there would be like FAST, the teams that would train over in like Bahrain and stuff, or the security force guys.
Yeah.
They weren't deploying, and so they would like guard like these big bases, and all they did was like high-level CQB and things like that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So when you're doing like light infantry, massive movements, all that stuff kind of just goes out the window?
Yeah, I mean, you're still doing it on the individual level, and I had a really good squad leader and team leader, but they were teaching us stuff like that, and we would still do those drills at like, you know, Mojave Vipers, what they called it. It's been called CAX. It's probably called something else now, but it's 29 Palms.
This is the closest thing you can get to being in combat. The heat, the sand, the wind, the rock, all of that is replicated out here naturally at 29 Palms.
We'd go set up in mount towns and everything else because at that time during the war, the main thing we're doing is counterinsurgency operations. So you're just trying to disrupt whatever they're doing and win the populace over by not like kicking in doors and slapping people around. You're just trying to be like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
Can we pay for the damage we either did or did not do? And like, that's it.
It gets to the point where Afghans are saying, you people are so terrified, what are you even doing here?
Are there things that you see within the gun space on the interwebs that you'd be like, hey, that actually would not fly in real life?
Yeah, I think the number one thing people aren't thinking about is just like movement. And when I say movement, like how long you'd be moving under gear, how long you'd be moving under the weather, and like how taxing that would be. Like when I was in Afghanistan, we only had like an MRE a day, and I'm 180 now, and I would get down to like 130 at some point just because you don't have enough nutrition. Atrophy and fatigue, like those are honestly the biggest things that'll wear down someone on the battlefield.
How long did it take for you to get just pretty worn down, like say in Marja, or in Marja, how long would it take for you to feel like you're just ground down?
The first month you're there when you're like actively doing the assault and the clear phase. By the time that's done, you're deployment fit because you're patrolling every day. Like your body just starts adjusting to this new way of life. But until then, it's like walking through mud every single day.
No kid.
Because you're just not used to it. You know, it's so hot, and then all of a sudden it wouldn't be. Or like when we inserted March in February, it was like 80 degrees, but it got down to like 50, and I almost got medevaced actually because I got hypothermia so bad.
No kid.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
What were the months you were there?
In Marja, we got there in December, but the mission started in February and we left in July of 2010.
So you were there for a bit.
It sucked.
Good Lord.
210 days combat. Like, I know there's the tactical games. They seem to be doing stuff pretty cool. I've been impressed by what they've been doing. Like actually putting people under these like high stress scenarios and then actually shooting. That seems to be the most applicable to like gun culture and military, combining it. But again, like what I did was so very specific to like light infantry movements. You're in the middle of nowhere. You're setting up patrol bases and you're just living out of those. So it's like, how can I move across the battle space with the least amount of effort? And then, you know, in Marja, it wasn't just contact patrols, it was combat patrols. So it's not like if we see the enemy, it's when we see the enemy. And it was every day there.
How many Taliban fighters were you going up against?
Anywhere between like, you know, fire team size elements to rifle squad to one time our patrol base actually got masked on by intelligence, said upwards of 30 people.
No kid.
Yeah, our patrol base was the eastern limit of advance in Marja, and literally dudes just started showing up in Hiluxes and Corollas.
No kid.
Like, it's hard to put it in context, but like imagine you're just in the middle of an ancient land and you're like, is that a Corolla? Like literally Corollas, dudes just started unloading. And it got to the point where we had to start conserving ammo.
Oh shit.
Because it was that bad. It was multiple hours of firefight, and then eventually Gunny Walgren.
Let them try to fight the United States Marine Corps Conventional.
You know, from the speech, the John Glenn speech, showed up in a mobile section. He had tricked the battalion into giving him, he said it was a logistics train, but he made a mobile section out of like MRAPs, and he showed up, and that was the only reason they stopped massing on us.
No kid.
Yeah, they were going to make a big push from the south to push in, and I think it would have been fine, but it wouldn't have been good.
I want to kind of talk about historically about the battle.
Yeah.
Where were a lot of those guys from?
Dude, they're from all over. I mean, so it's hard to really know because like what would happen most often is that the Taliban in particular would hire people from all over and then move them to help with the harvest and cultivation of poppy, which
now Afghanistan produces 90% of the world's heroin.
Led to opium, which fueled all of their terrorist activities.
And you were telling me that people don't really have this notion, but the Taliban were pretty well funded.
They're very well funded. They pay better than anyone else. We always said like anyone would join the Taliban, they're offering more money than you'd ever see. For instance, and this is common knowledge, like the way they would go about like planning an IED is they would pay one person to dig the hole. That person would get a few $1,000s in American dollars.
Sick, just to dig a hole?
Just to dig a hole.
Shoot, I'll start digging holes, man.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a good good trade deal.
Yeah, and then phase 2 would be put something in the hole. You get paid more, it gets more and more dangerous as each step goes up. Phase 3, cover the hole, and then you get paid more. And then that's literally how it works. Less of them are about like the mission and the belief, and more of them are just about economic opportunity.
Hey, it's some good Skrilla digging some holes, dude.
I mean, you dig holes all the time. You want to get paid to dig a hole?
Boy, do I.
That's what I'm saying. They would do that, and they're just trying to protect their crop, and we were trying to stop them from doing that.
Were you guys there to disrupt the production of opium?
Yeah, at that time we had like a plan of like a poppy buyback plan, which was horrible because we paid like 75 cents of the dollar. We paid less, and they were like, okay. And we're like, don't sell it to the Taliban. And they're like, sure, we won't. But guess what they did? They took our money and then they sold to the Taliban.
Gentlemen, this video is made possible by sponsors. Sponsors such as Americana Pipe Dream Apparel, fantastic zoomers, getting after it in the milsurp space and arena. They have a slew of things to take your drip to the next level, and they are always updating that website, so you don't want to miss out. You can take your military surplus collection to the next level. Anywhere from manuals to knives to clothing, sometimes night vision. I think maybe they run out of stock, but who knows? Maybe we'll get more in stock. You just have to be up to snuff with what's going on. We also have to thank the ammo sponsor of the channel, AAC. All the ammo you saw us ripping in the intro was what we were using. A big thank you to them, and they want to get you equipped.
Modelo, huh? More like Modetto.
The earth out here is very unforgiving.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It really does remind me of Afghanistan. A thought I have often is that a lot of people don't really understand this. You got the military fundamentalists and the flat range extremists. They don't understand each other because their ships pass in the night, right? It's like what I did in the military is very, very specific. It's a very, very narrow thing. It doesn't have like universal applicability. The training I got on average is baseline for anyone from any walk of life to be able to conduct counterinsurgency operations, wherever they may be in this world, as opposed to like flat range stuff, which is more high end. You have more tools at your disposal. Your toolkit's bigger. They just don't really understand each other, but they're still doing the same thing. Practical application, time and time again, repetition. The more things you have, the more things that break. My kit, when I started out, was big. It was bulky. By the end of it, I have adjusted, like you can even look at photos, like I've adjusted everything. Stuff's come off, I've zip tied things. I finally found like that soft spot of like that perfect rhythm. About halfway through the deployment, you figure out where everything needs to go, where it needs to be, and your job changes too.
I like that train of thought. I think there is a happy medium. I think within the gun space, all we really have are firearms. Like there's guys that go out and train pretty hard, but for the most part, a lot of dudes typically just go to the range, work on fundamentals of like being a good shooter. You get nothing wrong with that. It's just, it doesn't tie into the grand scheme of things of how these guns actually get employed on a massive level. So then it's like you're spending all this time doing like high-speed drills, shooting in unconventional positions, and then when the rubber would finally meet the road, a lot of that may go out the window. I don't think it's a bad thing to know all that stuff. I think it's an excellent thing to be a very proficient shooter. It's just when we see the two worlds colliding, I think that's where a lot of the friction comes from. I mean, there's the guys like the bro vets that would try and gatekeep civilians wanting to train with guns because they're like, why would you need to do that? And then civilians are like, well, because I want to. And yet again, I agree with that because it's your God-given right to defend yourself and be as well armed as you can. I do think there's some practicality that would go into that though.
Yeah, there's way too many guys that are like, this is how I would do it, blah, 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 back in my day. It's not the same thing. You and people like Grand Thumb and Donut and Brandon, y'all are the people I come to when I have gun questions, when I want to learn from subject matter experts. You obviously have a greater wealth of knowledge than I do.
Well, my thing is like, if I want to actually talk to someone that's been and done combat, why not talk to a combat veteran?
I am him.
Like, I think there's a lot of that flat range ninja-isms that comes in like, well, I would do it this way. It's like, you've never been shot at.
Never been shot at? You ever watched somebody die? You ever seen a thing explode? All of it's based on not having enemy fire. The ground's not exploding. That's what'll change everything. Like, I'll go right, I'll lean this way, I'll go left. No, you won't. It's all sorts of different things. Or I'll throw smoke. Smoke's great, but they can still shoot through it.
So a big why behind this video. Essentially, it's looking at what would really go on and make up the anatomy of a gunfight. What we often know within social media, we see the high-speed breakdown shooting, guys looking really cool for camera, and then we look at actual combat footage, none of that's taking place within inside a combat situation. The truth's probably somewhere in the middle, right? You can probably do some high-speed cool guys shooting out there and look really cool doing it. So I mean, I think we have this notion, we get comfy on the flat range, or we have the perfect world. Either you're on the flat range, a semi-flat range like this, where there's uneven terrain you can actually work around, and you're slaying cardboard. The cardboard is not trying to kill you. You win every engagement. And then when you go into the reality of situations where it's a two-way range now, people are trying to kill you, a lot of that stuff is going to get shaken to its core. And you're going to learn the good old hard-fashioned way, either by paying in blood or getting hurt. Now, one thing I want to talk about is going into the anatomy of a gunfight. when I think of a firefight or a gunfight, just lack of experience. In my head, I'm assuming you're doing your patrolling, and then you start taking rounds and you react to contact that way.
Depending on where the direction is, let's say we're on patrol, we're moving, you'd say contact left, or it's coming from the left, everyone gets down. You put rounds on target immediately to the best of your knowledge of the area, at least the direction.
Now, let me stop you there. So there's already this, you're doing suppressive fire, right?
Yes.
Not every round's gonna be an A-zone hit.
I don't care if you're shooting anybody, just shoot something, the walls, whatever.
No, you're just trying to keep the enemy's head down, because 9 times out of 10 when they were shooting us, we were in an open area, uncovered, and vulnerable.
Could you ever tell, like, immediately where fire is coming from?
Yeah, because it was usually coming from like a tree line, a covered position. Anytime we came across a tree line that was separating fields, any type of intersection, if we had to cross like a wadi canal, that would be a place to get us, because we would have to go down and come back up, and then we're easy, slow targets. When I had the 203, the first thing I would do is contact left, shift left, put a 203 in the air. It sounds big and bad. It's not, but it'll keep their heads down.
What do you mean by that?
These rounds are nowhere near as powerful as what is perceived in the media, particularly movies.
The casualty kill radius on a 203 isn't big at all. It actually doesn't have a kill radius on it. It just has a casualty radius.
Gotcha.
But it sounds terrifying. Just a huge
in
explosion.
my head, a 203 sounds pretty sick.
It sounds great. It's just the kill radius is non-existent.
Gotcha.
Like if we were just moving and we were to put one down, everyone would keep their head down, and you're able to bound to cover and then start attacking the enemy from there. And usually we would like move towards them if we could, unless it was like over like 500 meters.
What were your typical engagement distances?
Anywhere between like 100 to 300 meters, give or take.
So were they trying to operate within inside of you guys, like, you know, maybe danger close area?
Yeah, they would like to put us in between other villages, so they would put their backs against one village as we're crossing, because Afghanistan, in particular Mars, is just a bunch of agricultural hamlets. It's like a village with like a bunch of buildings, then nothing. So like as you're maneuvering from village to village, there's just a bunch of like open space, and so they would put their backs against that, because they know ultimately if the locals don't like you, then they're gonna push you out. It's an easy way for them to be like, look what the Americans are doing.
So this is just one little microcosm of conflict that we're looking at from Zach's perspective, that he went through and lived through. Of course, things change throughout different conflicts, different timelines. We're kind of doing a little bit of a time capsule for Zach's time when he was in the Marine Corps. So I would deduce that things are gonna change even in our current timeline of how engagements would play out, of course, right?
Yeah, I mean, this was just very specific to what I did. Most of it's really just real bare bones light infantry stuff, trying to maneuver against a crazy open battle space. And so like once you're able to do that, pack light, move quick, you're able to actually succeed in combat, at least during that era.
Now real quick, let's talk about the gear that you would typically use.
I had an M4203 when I was a team leader, so I would have a belt with suspenders on it to keep the weight off my waist and the weight on my shoulders, and then I would put 6 rounds in each side and then 1 in the gun, so that's 13, and then I would have anywhere between 4 to 6 mags on me. And I would also have flares, a bayonet, a GPS, a watch of some sort, and a compass as well, just in case.
You run a plate carrier?
Plate carrier, yeah, minimal. We were the first ones to use those, actually.
Really?
We had to give them all back, because there just wasn't enough of that stuff out there yet.
Do you know if those were, what kind of plates those were? Were they ceramic?
They were all ceramic plates.
Do they feel heavy?
Yeah, they sucked. In the shadow of Iraq, the big thing they were pushing then was the modular tactical vest. So that was made for, in particular, troops in vehicles, because post the surge of the Iraq War, in the Green Zone era, they made all of these, like, you look like a turtle basically, and it was lined with like fleece fur in it, so it was like you were already sweating, but it like covered up your whole neck, because it was made for you to basically sit inside of a vehicle and take the least amount of damage when you get blown up in a vehicle.
So when you got to Marja,
yeah,
was that the more intense conflict you were in?
Every single day.
Every single day a gunfight?
Uh-huh.
Now, did you build a very high stress inoculation towards the end of that?
I mean, by the end of it, I was just kind of used to it. It never felt like it was gonna end. You know how many days you're gonna be there, but even when we did the relief in place, so you do like a left seat, right seat with like you're leaving, they're coming in, we took casualties then too. The only time I felt relief was when I put my boys on the bird and I saw them take off. I was nervous because it wasn't Osprey, but I've never ridden on one, but I was like, oh no. And they have the reputation that they have for a reason. I don't know why they're so bad, but that's literally, I was like, as soon as I saw them take off, I was like, my job's done. Now I just gotta make it home after this.
Yeah, that's pretty gnarly. I remember reading about and researching some World War II soldiers, like say the Marines of the Pacific. They're in combat for so long, they start getting confident and even cocky in some cases, because they've been doing it for so long. Did you ever like experience anything like that where guys started doing things that you consider unsafe?
Yeah, I was doing them.
All right, everybody ready? Cover fire! Frag out! Let's move!
What would be some advice with what you know and what you've been through that you would offer the well-armed, well-prepared civilian that's really taking this kind of thing serious?
Enlist, become a citizen.
Service guarantees citizenship.
No, what I would say, train for any type of scenario and prepare for the worst. You don't have to live in fear, but everyone should be well armed and understand their rights and be able to know the things that they're capable of doing. Okay. We don't got to live in like a fear vacuum.
No, I mean, America's a pretty safe place. I mean, I think one thing that keeps it so safe is the American citizen that has that mindset of being well prepared for the worst case scenario in case the Ruskies start falling out of the sky.
We're ready. Red Dawn? No, red, white, and blue.
That's right, you heard it here first.
R.I.P. Toby.
R.I.P. Toby.
I think everyone should find a way to be educated when it comes to firearm ownership and firearm safety. I by no means am an expert. I've qualified you as an expert. I'm really good. I'm really good at walking around in a circle, going checkpoint 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. That's what I'm good at. That's a very specific thing that I did, but it gave me a lot of experience to know what I'm capable of and like being able to see a lot of different things and like honestly just gave me a love for my country because I've seen a country that is constantly dealing with a power vacuum that is constantly at the whims of the powerful and they have no way to protect themselves or defend themselves.
Before we go, did you see any Nephilim while you were in Afghanistan?
Brother, they told me about them. They told me about them. It's the one thing they told us. So they would come up to us and be like, don't go out at night, there's vampires and there's giants in the north. And you're like, whatever, that's no big deal. And that's what they told us on the first tour. The second tour, we were the first Marine unit to work with the Afghan National Army. They were integrated with us every single day we worked with them. They would tell us that like at night, the giants come down from the north and they take people and there's nothing you can do to stop them. And they're like, oh yeah, they live in the north and everyone knows it. And these are people that majority can't read. They don't have any education other than what their local village elders or moms have taught them, which is very limited at best. That was the only time I'd ever heard that and jump cut until a few years later I heard Mr. Ballin and other people talk about it. And I was like, oh damn, I guess those dudes weren't lying.
Nephilim confirmed on administrative results. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you guys tuning in. You got more than you asked for. We had a good time, and we got to hear what actually goes into the anatomy of a gunfight from a combat veteran. Zach, where can people find you?
Veteran with a Sign on all social media platforms. Check out the YouTube page, Veteran with a Sign, and the podcast, After Action Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.
Got nothing else for you, gentlemen? We'll catch you on the flip.